the last knowledge seed, we discussed the general idea, the general architecture around research design. Now, if you remember, it would have been a bit abstract to start with. So what I wanted to do is to give you more specific examples. So example of design or bits of design, because sometimes it doesn't cover a full design, so that you can see, what it would look like. What's important to, so that's if you remember the general figure, what's important to remember is that some of this can be combined. So it's not fully, exclusive, necessarily exclusive, and we'll come back to that. So the first one is a very classic hypothetical deductive design. So that's what's in red on the figure. So if you remember, you start from theory, you develop your hypothesis, you confront them with observation, and that will confirm, or some others would say corroborate, your theory. So basically, you have to write strong hypotheses. So they have to be connected to a very strong theoretical corpus. So it's not about, putting a theory on the page based on what you feel or what you think. It has to be completely, thoroughly backed by theory. You have to be able to connect, variable A or concept A with concept B properly, right? And that's based on the literature. So the literature will tell you what can be connected, what can be the cause for something else. If the apple falls, it's because of gravity. So that's your model, that's your theory, that's what you want to test. Now, you might have a general theory, and one of the difficulties is to express this hypothesis operationally. So, what do you actually measure? So you want to test, for instance, whether, introducing an employee survey will make people more satisfied or more happy at work or more engaged, more committed to the company. I'm not saying it does, but let's say that's what you want to test. Aren't you referring to a recent research somebody is currently conducting in our university? Well, the question is, then you have to operationalize everything. So you have to measure, what do we mean by actually introducing a survey? So is it just asking the questions? Is it asking the question and then following up? In asking the question, making the result public and launching some change management to modify the situation? Is it doing all this plus, informing everybody on how we have progressed? Is it all this plus actually making progress that will make people more committed? And on what does it mean to be committed? How do you assess that? How do you evaluate it? Well, there might be a scale already published that helps you to do it, but you still have to choose the right scale. So you have a lot of work to transpose your theory into something that can be tested. Then you have to measure. So let's say you give all the employees a questionnaire about their commitment after the survey has been introduced. And that's how you test. So you measure it, you build your statistical model, and then you examine the results. And if your hypothesis was, that a survey once introduced creates an effect, well, there you go, you have your answer. Is there an effect? Is there not an effect? If there is an effect, your theory can be confirmed or corroborated. If there is no effect, well, it means you were wrong and the theory doesn't hold. That's how it works. And that's how we don't really create new knowledge, but we validate and bring together. One very important aspect of the hypothetical deductive model is that you bring together all the knowledge into something that's testable, and then you test it. And that's very important because that, at least in similar circumstances, you can apply the same theory. So maybe you want to introduce the same type of survey in another organization. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of conditions to make a survey successful, and often it doesn't actually contribute to employee well-being, which is not that surprising. Now, the other very common broad design is you go up, and that's the idea of exploratory design. So you go up the left side of the figure, and you start from fresh observation. still, in most cases, with a bit of a literal view. But there will be something like the observation of a new phenomenon. There's a possibility that it's relevant in different contexts, so that starts to be really interesting. Then you can use a lot, broad spectrum of method to explore things, because actually you can use quant. You can explore something by measuring if it happens always at the same time, in the same, if there are regularities in what you can observe. Or you can, and that's the other end, you can engage with people, such as something that we'll see later in an ethnographic study, and describe what's called an intersubjective experience. How do I create reality by interacting with others in the social world? Well, that's more the type of intersubjective experience, understanding of reality. And then you provide an account of the observation. So if you have measured things, you can create a model which would maybe simulate what has happened. Or you can derive a first theory from what you have observed. Or you can create propositions. What are propositions? Well, they are testable connection between concepts. So you do a few case studies and you derive interesting connections. So for instance, you don't have the right result you want about your quant study that you conducted about the impact of surveys, of employee surveys on happiness. And so you ask people, what did you think about the survey? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. And you do that in different contexts. And then all of a sudden you have your eureka moment. Well, actually, you have to do something about it. It's not just a survey. You have to follow up. You have to actually implement things to change the situation. Otherwise, people will just think, well, it's one more thing that management is not doing for us. They're doing a survey, but they don't do anything. They might be actually less happy. So you explore, you interview people, and you realize that, well, there are a few things. There's a few things to do for the survey to be efficient. So that's your theory. That somebody else can be testing. So that's when you'll be developing your new theory based on the observation. And that can allow for, different, sometimes you might not have